Okay, so you want to own an LNG terminal. Sounds clean. You build a giant fridge on the coast, you cool some gas until it turns into a liquid, you pour it onto a ship, and the world pays you for the privilege of staying warm. You're not a gambler. You're not a landlord. You're a toll booth on the global energy supply. Every molecule of natural gas that wants to leave America and go heat a home in Tokyo or Madrid has to pass through a machine like yours, and you get paid either way. Here's the problem. The cheapest series version of this machine costs more than the entire annual budget of most countries. It takes the better part of a decade to build, assuming nobody sues you, which they will. And the whole fortune you're about to spend rests on a single, unforgiving rule of physics. The liquid inside must never, ever be allowed to warm up, because if it does, in one isolated valve, on one ordinary Wednesday, it can erase an entire year of revenue before lunch. Sounds amazing, right? Well, not exactly. Let's talk about what it actually costs to enter the most expensive infrastructure business on Earth. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the man who basically invented this industry ended up losing his yacht. First, you have to choose which kind of terminal you even want, because there are two of them, and one is a trap. The cheap version is an import terminal, a regasification plant. Gas arrives already liquefied on a ship. You warm it back into a gas. You pump it into the local grid. Simpler machine, smaller bill. On paper, that's the same way in. The problem is that an import terminal only makes sense if your country actually needs to buy gas. Hold that thought, because it's about to ruin somebody's life later in this video. The version that actually prints money is the opposite. An export terminal, a liquefaction plant. You take cheap domestic gas, you chill it to minus 162 degrees Celsius until it shrinks to 1/600th of its volume, and you ship it to whoever is paying the most that month. That's the real business. And the real business is breathtakingly expensive. You can support us by liking, subscribing, and telling us which country you are watching from. The cheapest credible export terminal still runs into the billions. To put a real number on it, when Cheniere built the original receiving terminal at Sabine Pass in Louisiana, the bill was around $1.4 billion, and that was just the front door. To turn it into an export plant, the capital spending ran past $10 billion. And they didn't stop. The latest expansion at that one site is budgeted at roughly $15 billion. Just one new liquefaction unit, a single train in the industry's language, recently came with a construction contract worth $4.69 billion. One train. Down the coast at Corpus Christi, the expansion alone is $5.5 billion. And this is where things become absurd, because the building isn't even the hard part. Before you pour a single foundation, you need permission, and not the normal kind. You need the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to bless the site. You need the Department of Energy to grant you a license to export to countries that don't have a free trade agreement with the US, which is to say, most of the profitable ones. That process takes years and an army of lawyers, and the rules can shift underneath you. In early 2024, the US government simply paused new export approvals while it studied them. Billions in planned projects froze overnight on a memo. And this isn't a niche game. The US is now the largest LNG exporter on Earth, shipping nearly 12 billion cubic feet of the stuff every single day. Ahead of Australia, ahead of Qatar, which means the few people who own these terminals aren't running businesses. They're running choke points on the world's energy supply. And if you're already a billionaire and you find all of this charmingly small, then you skip America entirely and go to Qatar, which sits on top of the largest gas field on the planet and builds these things at a scale that makes the entire Gulf Coast look like a hobby. That's the top of the pyramid. But let's assume you're merely rich, not nation-state rich, and you've built your plant on the coast of Texas. Now comes the only question that actually matters. Where does the money really come from? And the answer is the most beautiful trick in modern finance. Because you'd assume an LNG company makes money by buying gas cheap and selling it expensive. Buy low, sell high, pray the spread holds. That's a trader's life. Exciting, and a wonderful way to go broke. The smart operators don't do that. They don't really sell gas at all. They sell access to the machine. Think of your terminal as a toll bridge. You don't own the cars. You don't care where they're going. You just own the only bridge. and everyone who wants to cross pays you a fixed toll. In LNG, that toll is called a liquefaction fee, and it runs roughly $2.25 to $3.50 per unit of gas, plus a charge pegged to the American gas price to cover what you actually spend cooling it. The customer brings their own gas. The customer hires their own ship. The customer carries all the risk on what that gas is worth when it lands. You just run the bridge and collect the toll. And here's the part that turns this from a business into a fortress. These contracts are take or pay. That means the customer pays your fee whether they show up or not. Gas prices crash. Their problem, they still pay. Their economy tanks and they don't want the cargo, they pay anyway. You signed them for 20 years, and over 95% of a major operator's capacity is locked up exactly like this, deep into the 2030s, with the toll guaranteed. So picture the contradiction. You've spent $15 billion on a machine, but once it's running and contracted, you stop being an energy company that lives and dies on volatile prices, and you become something closer to a utility, boring, predictable, and almost impossible to disrupt. Cheniere, the company that pioneered all of this, shipped 646 cargoes in 2024 and pulled in around $15.7 billion in revenue. Its core operating earnings run near $7 billion a year, not because it bet right on gas, because it owns the bridge and the world has to cross it. I finally understand how this world works, you're thinking. The math is bulletproof. Everything you build on top of it is not, because the toll only counts the money coming in. Now let's talk about the river of money going out, the river that never stops. Start with the electricity. Cooling gas to minus 162 degrees is one of the most energy-hungry industrial processes humans have ever attempted. A large liquefaction plant is often one of the single biggest consumers of power and gas in its entire region. You are, in effect, burning a fortune in energy to compress a fortune in energy every day, forever. Then there's the feed gas itself, which you're buying constantly. The maintenance, which is not optional, because remember, every part of this plant is holding a liquid that desperately wants to become a vapor and expand 600 times over. A cryogenic plant is a controlled emergency, 24 hours a day, so you staff it like one. Engineers, safety crews, round-the-clock monitoring, and the kind of insurance premiums that come with operating what is essentially a very polite bomb on the waterfront. And then there are the costs you can't even predict. The environmental lawsuits, which are effectively a permanent line item, because communities near these terminals fight them for years. The regulatory reviews that can stall you at any moment. The simple, brutal fact that the plant takes years to build before it earns a single dollar, while the interest on $15 billion of debt compounds quietly in the dark the entire time. This is the trap that catches people. The revenue is guaranteed. The costs are guaranteed too. They just point the other direction, and they begin the day you break ground, long before the first ship ever arrives. The business doesn't start burning money once it opens. It starts burning money the moment you say yes. Which brings us to the part where it all goes wrong. Because in this industry, when it goes wrong spectacularly. June 8th, 2022, Freeport LNG, on the Texas coast. At the time, one of the largest export terminals in the country, responsible for somewhere between 15 and 17% of all American LNG exports. A section of pipe failed. The LNG inside had warmed and expanded. A pressure relief valve had been improperly isolated, and the result was exactly what physics had promised all along. A rupture, a vapor cloud, an explosion, a fireball. No one was killed. The damage stayed inside the fence, and the company's first estimate was that they'd be back online in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks became 8 months. The plant didn't fully return until 2023. For most of a year, a sixth of America's export capacity was simply gone, in the middle of a global energy crisis, while Europe was scrambling for every molecule it could find. Gas prices lurched up and down on every single press release about whether the plant might restart. The lost revenue ran into the billions, and then, when the dust settled, the regulator's eventual environmental fine for the entire catastrophe came to $163,000. Pocket change. The explosion had cost the company 1,000 times of that before the lawyers even sat down. One valve, one mistake, a year of the machine, erased. But the most cinematic failure in this industry isn't a plant, It's a man. His name is Charif Souki, and he is the reason American LNG exports exist at all. A former restaurateur, he founded Cheniere and bet everything on building an import terminal. Convinced America would need to buy the world's gas, he finished it right as the shale boom hit, and overnight, America didn't need to import anything. His brand new billion-dollar terminal was, in the words of one account, virtually mothballed on opening day. The math stopped working the instant the doors opened. So he did the impossible. He turned the whole thing around. He rebuilt the company to export instead of import and dragged it back from the edge of bankruptcy into the most important LNG business in the country. And then, weeks before that first historic cargo finally sailed, the activist investor Carl Icahn pushed him out of the company he had founded. Souki, once the highest paid executive in America, at an estimated $142 million a year, walked away from his own creation right before it paid off. He started again with a new company, Tellurian. It failed. His lenders seized his shares and dumped them onto the market. He lost his 100-foot sailing yacht, the Tango. He lost his 813-acre ranch in Aspen. Court filings put his debts north of $99 million. The man who invented the modern American gas export industry watched it become a $100 billion machine from the outside, with his boat repossessed. So, after all of that, the only question left: if you do this right, how much do you actually make? Take the cheap path first, the import terminal. Lower cost to build, but you're making the exact bet that destroyed Souki, that your market will keep needing to buy. Get the country wrong, get the timing wrong, and you've built a multi-billion-dollar monument to a demand that evaporated. That isn't a business. That's a coin flip with a 10-year delay built in. Now the real path: a fully contracted export terminal at scale. The numbers are surreal. Cheniere's $15.7 billion in revenue throws off more than $5 billion in distributable cash in a single year. The capital cost is enormous and the payback takes years, but it's set against 20-year contracts, where the toll is guaranteed by some of the largest energy buyers on the planet. In a good year, you are a money-printing utility, wearing the costume of an oil company. In a bad year, a cost overrun, a permit freeze, one isolated valve on one ordinary Wednesday. You are Freeport. Or you are Souki, watching a lifetime of work go up in a short-lived fireball. That's the whole paradox of owning an LNG terminal. The revenue is the most bulletproof in all of heavy industry, and the people who build it still manage to go broke, blow up, or get pushed out of their own empires. So if you're going to spend $15 billion on a machine that turns thin air into money, just remember the one rule that actually runs this business. The gas has to stay cold. The contracts have to stay signed, and you have to survive long enough to collect. In this business, winning was never the hard part. Surviving is. You can tell us which topic you want us to cover in our next video. Thanks for watching.